Hey everybody, it's Teany. How is everybody doing? So I see we have a couple of posts. Hopefully you guys can make it tonight. I'm so excited. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't normally talk about my backstory, but it's so funny. Um, Today we're going to talk about my personal story on growing up in the projects, the good, the bad, and the ghetto, and how to shift the poverty mindset and the ghetto mindset. Like I said, I'm a little nervous. I don't usually talk about my backstory, but because I get to interview so many amazing people, I thought, you guys should probably hear a little bit about where I come from and like some of the things that I've had to learn throughout the years. Hey, what's up? Hey, everybody. Hey, Carlos. Oh, it's so good to see you guys. I'm going to make sure that everything is. You guys going to talk about growing up in the projects, and if anybody wants to join me and talk a little bit about their experience, feel free. I am so down to not be by myself on the stage right now. But I am looking forward to having a chat with you about, what it was like, right? Because not too many people know that you can survive the projects and the ghettos, right? You can. Good things actually do come out of those places. And I think I could say I'm proof and point that not everything that grows up in the ghetto stays in the ghetto necessarily, right? So I hope you guys are looking forward to hearing my story because I am nervous, but definitely looking forward to telling it. So thank you guys for joining me. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Today is the Purpose with Passion video series. As you guys know, I do this every Thursday, bringing you only the best so that you can find your passion and pursue your purpose. So today we're going to talk about how I grew up in the projects, the good, the bad, and the ghetto, and how to shift that poverty mindset. So let's get started because I'm kind of itching to like tell you a little bit about, where I come from, how things transpired in my life, and how the heck I got to where I am, here talking to you guys and interviewing all these amazing people. The next few sessions are going to be about some of my backstory. And the reason I'm doing that is because a lot of the stuff that we go through ourselves as coaches are what really inspires us. And that's like fodder, right? It's like the stuff that we use to inspire us to help you guys, right? To move forward, to move you forward, get you out of the fire that you're in and help you ignite it in other positive places, right? So this stuff is going to help you and show you that, you can be resilient, you can be happy, you can pursue your passion and purpose. And all of that can be found in the most inconspicuous places and through the most, unassuming people. And like I said, case in point, myself. So like I said, today I want to talk about growing up as a Latina in the Heights and the Bronx and how that shaped a lot of who I am today. So I grew up in two places, in case you didn't know. I grew up in Washington Heights and in the Bronx, in Kingsbridge, the Kingsbridge projects in the North Bronx. And what might be surprising is that I actually wasn't born here. Like I was actually born in the Dominican Republic in Santo Domingo, in La Capital. And I speak perfect Spanish. And we'll get into that in a minute because my parents worked really hard to make sure I did not allow the language, the culture, the values, and all that good stuff to wither and die as soon as I got to this country, right? So I definitely did keep a lot of those cultural pieces as part of who I am. But don't let this American accent fool you. Like I said, I definitely did grow up in I was born in the Dominican Republic and learned the Spanish language. And I actually came when I was 2 years old. So I came when I was super duper young with my mom and dad. And I still remember the picture that my parents took when we got to the airport. My sister's in one hand, and myself in the other hand of my mom. And my dad had already been here a few years. He was actually setting the stage for us to have a better life, if you will. So, and actually, I don't remember this because I was so young, but we did end up living with a cousin of my father. And that was pretty short-lived. I think maybe it was less than a year before we got our own place. But anyway, I came when I was 2 years old. And so I'm practically American, right? Which is why I don't really have a super strong accent. But it's funny because whenever I tell people, or even sometimes when I don't tell people that I'm Latina, they will know. They will kind of hear the accent a little bit when it comes out. And maybe that's also the Bronx Hispanic accent that comes out because, I was raised in the Bronx pretty much most of my life. So it comes out every once in a while. Hey, if you guys are here, say hi. Say what's up. Hey, Melissa. How you doing? Okay. So I wrote a couple of notes because I'm nervous and, I don't usually tell people my story, but I'm going to tell it to you today. And like I said, I came when I was 2 years old. But one of the things that my mom definitely wanted for us to keep was some of these like Dominican cultural values. And what I mean by that is she worked really hard for us to learn the Spanish language at home because we were going to learn English in school. So actually, Spanish is my first language. Surprising, right? But it actually is. And obviously throughout the years in school and stuff, I learned English. But Spanish is actually my first language. And like I said, she helped us continue holding on to the Spanish language, but also the culture, the food, and for better or worse, some of the values, right? So I'll get into that in a few minutes as I talk about my story. But my mom worked really hard, and God bless her. Like she fought tooth and nail for us to at least keep the language going. And so what happened at home was that we would only speak in Spanish. And at school, obviously, we would learn English. So I definitely kept that throughout the year. So as I was growing up, it was interesting to see, but I pretty much grew up in the ghetto, right? So I lived in Washington Heights until I was about 5, so like 3 years. And then I moved up here in the Bronx to the projects, the other ghetto, right? So I pretty much moved from there to here in a short period of time before I was 5 years old even. So I've pretty much grown up in these kinds of like underprivileged, low income housing, like, types of areas. And it's crazy because I was definitely not interested in the typical things that other kids were interested in, especially in our neighborhood. And I think part of that was because our mom, again, she worked really hard to help us stay on the straight and narrow kind of thing. And honestly, my sister and I were a bit of nerds as we were growing up. Like we were definitely like into reading books and like, I wanted to hang out outside and I wanted to be out there hanging out with my friends, but it just was not going to happen. My mom kind of knew too much. Maybe she watched a little bit too much TV and knew that, being in the ghetto, in the Bronx, in the projects, right? Not a good idea for a young Latina girl, right? Like probably not a good idea. Let's not, sabotage this scenario here and like have her go the wrong route. She has said that a lot as we were growing up. Like, I don't want you guys going the wrong way. Try to stay, on the straight and narrow. I worked really hard for you guys, et cetera, et cetera. But anyways, so it all sounds awesome, right? That, I grew up and my mom was so great and all this stuff. But what you guys don't know is that, well, and I'll get into my parents' story another time, but when we came here, when I was 2 years old, we lived with my uncle for like less than a year. But then when we moved out of his house, we moved into a 1-bedroom apartment where we shared a room in typical Latino fashion. We shared a room, 2 beds, parents and mom in one bed, my mom and dad in one bed, and my sister and I in the other bed in the same room in about 173rd Street in Washington Heights. I mean, literally, we were in the same room. And I feel for my parents because I don't know what kind of like private time they had ever, right? Like we were literally young kids. We probably talked all night, didn't want to go to sleep and kept them up late at night. But seriously, like 1-bedroom apartment, 2 beds. Not to mention the mice and the cockroaches infestation that were in our apartment. I distinctly remember my dad throwing una chancleta, if you know what I mean, una chancleta at the mouse across the living room, killing it. Gross, I know. But those were the conditions that we grew up in. It was literally like maybe 600 square foot apartment, including the kitchen, the bathroom, our bedroom, and the living room. Like it was super, super small apartment. And maybe it's not so small now because like I know in New York City downtown, there's so many small apartments, like, you know, not even 1 bedroom, 0 bedroom apartments, right? That are just living room only. But I mean, for 4 people, come on, right? Crazy. So yeah, we all were crammed into that, you know, square space because that's really all our parents could afford. And when my mom and dad came here, they didn't really know a lick of English. My dad still struggles with the English language. He still doesn't know much. My mom obviously has learned, and some of you know her already. She's a speech therapist, so she's definitely mastered. She can say she mastered the English language. But when they first got here, and I mean, I love talking about it, but it's also painful to talk about because, I mean, they worked in factories. You know, my mom worked in a curtain factory. She worked in an eyeglass factory. And my dad pretty much did it all. Like he was a jack of all trades, whatever it took to get our family to move forward. And that's one thing I have to say about the Latin culture and Latin people. We definitely work freaking hard. Okay. If there's one value and like, you know, personality trait I learned and gained is that we work hard. But one thing I learned as I was growing up is that we don't actually have to work that hard. We can actually just work smart, right? But back then, what did we know, right? We didn't know. Hey, Cece. Back then, we didn't know, right? So I'm telling everybody the story of how we grew up in the projects in the ghetto, and I'm telling them about our old apartment, 1 bedroom apartment in Washington Heights, and how my sister and I pretty much were in the same room as our parents, right? Anyway, so my parents had to work in factories. My dad, he was a cab driver. He was a candy truck driver. He was a huge truck driver. He was also a chef, dishwasher. And by the end, he also cleaned, business office buildings. So, like I said, he pretty much did it all. Like I'm sure there's more jobs that he's done that I maybe don't even know about because I was too young to remember. But I mean, those are just 5 of the ones that I can remember. And I always remember him coming home super duper late and super duper tired. And God help, God love him. He worked so hard. And until the very end where he just couldn't work anymore, when he pretty much was getting heart problems, but he worked really hard. And that's like I said, one thing I can say about Latinos is that we are freaking hard workers. But I remember poverty like it was yesterday. Like we literally grew up with nothing. I didn't even have Barbie dolls. Like we just couldn't afford it. Like I grew up with those plastic fake Barbie dolls, and it was embarrassing. There were so many things that were like kind of embarrassing as we were growing up because even though we were in the ghetto, like other people could afford things that my family couldn't afford, And so my girlfriends had like, real Barbie dolls and all these different cool things. While I had like plastic dolls, hand-me-downs from my sister and from maybe other cousins and whatnot. One of my step grandma, actually, she made clothes. So occasionally I would get like clothes from her that she would make. Reusing clothes, obviously, until mom was able to do laundry, tattered shoes. And even like as I was growing up, which I kind of love this now, but at the time, you're a kid and you want the real legit thing. My sister and I, because we couldn't afford to have, real Barbie dolls until later on in our youth, we would make paper dolls. And that's like a lot. Does anybody make paper dolls anymore? I actually saw a package of paper doll making in a store the other day, and I was like, oh my God, that's a thing now. Like, forget that. Like my sister and I literally had a piece of paper, a pencil, color pencils, and we made our own dolls out of paper, and we even would make clothes for them out of those paper and just literally tab them in. Like, I don't even know how we figured out how to do this, but when you have nothing, you find everything that you can get your hands on, anything that you can get your hands on in order to make things fun for yourself. And I have to say that if there's one thing that I loved about how I grew up is that even though I didn't have a lot of stuff, yeah, Melissa, it is a thing now again. Even though I didn't have a lot of stuff, like you get creative. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. I don't know if you guys grew up not having much, but I remember getting super creative because we had nothing, right? Like I had nothing. I didn't have a real doll. So we had to make dolls, right? And we couldn't buy furniture for the doll. So guess what? Cardboard, cut it out, take old clothes and fabric, make something out of that. For our plastic dolls, I would make clothes out of, our old shirts and things that were tattered, and maybe mom and dad's old stuff too. Like you figure it out, right? So, and I feel like I still have that kind of drive and mentality to be creative because I don't know, oftentimes like I just can't accept that there's no answer, right? There is always an answer. You just have to figure it out. And I think that came from like that time when I was a kid where I just had to make shit up. I had to come up with stuff, pardon my French. But, we had nothing else. We had to do it, right? But there were so many crazy things that happened in the projects. And I don't know, does anybody on this board, have any of you grown up in either the projects or ghetto areas or low income areas? You might know what I'm talking about. But so we grew up in the project area, and the projects is like basically like a neighborhood of like, I think it was like 9 buildings. They were all surrounded. We all surrounded like a little park around grass area, right? One of the buildings had a laundry area. And so while my mom, of course, she couldn't afford a sitter. So while my mom was doing the laundry, we were with her. But while she was inside the building in the basement level, we would go outside and play in the grass. So here's the crazy thing. My sister and I were really innocent. Like we did not, I was definitely like 7, 8 years old, probably. And I did not know what drugs were. I did not know what crack looked like. I just remember smelling it, right? I remember smelling, because we lived in a project building. We were on the 12th floor, and literally right next to our door was a stairwell. And I'll get into this in a bit, but I remember smelling weed almost every night coming out of that stairwell. And that smell would go into our apartment. And it was crazy. I really don't know how we didn't get high. Maybe we were high. Maybe that's why I'm so happy now. I don't know. But I do remember how crazy it was that smell would go into our apartment, and nobody complained. What are you going to do? Right? Like, this is the projects. Like, no one really gave a damn in that, that complex. The management office, everybody was doing weed somewhere. Right? So anyway, back to my laundry story. So my mom is doing laundry. I don't really know much about drugs or anything. Right? My sister and I are hanging out outside playing, on the grass with the trees and grass and whatever else. Right? And we come across these little things that look like little cups. And I don't remember. They probably did have a little bit of white dust in them, but I didn't know what that was. And I just remember she and I were like, oh my God, this is so cool. Let's just pick them up. Maybe we could use them as cups for our dolls, because again, we couldn't afford having a real kitchen, real furniture for our dolls or anything like that. So we literally collected crack vials. No lie. True story. Swear to God. It was crazy. I remember this like it was yesterday. And we had a plastic bag, and we took the bag of crack vials home and said, Mommy, look at all the stuff that we found. These are so cool. Can we use them as cups for our dolls? And my mom, I don't know, I can't remember the details of this, but I'm pretty sure she like smacked it out of our hands and made us wash our hands immediately after that. Again, I don't know how we didn't get high from those crack vials, but it was just insane, right? So that was a crazy story for my sister and I. But again, stories of the ghetto, one for the books, right? And our parents were really good. Like my mom really tried. She really tried to protect us from like the bad people hanging out late at night, like no partying. I really couldn't hang out at friends' houses. They can come to my house, but I couldn't go to their house. And of course, anytime my friends came over, she would overfeed them with massive plates of food, because that's how you do. You're Dominican. That's what we do. We eat, right? And we congregate and eat and have coffee, and that's what we do. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask away. But I'll keep talking about these crazy times growing up in the ghetto. So they did try to protect us, and they didn't really let us hang out too much with extracurricular activities and all that. And I even remember my mom walking me to school. until, I want to say, ninth or 10th grade in high school. And it's embarrassing to say that, but my mom really, really tried hard to protect us from becoming not good people, right? Right, like that's it. She really tried to protect us from not being good people. And you would think that my sister and I were really limited, right? And we kind of were in some ways. Like, we were very closed off from the world. I mean, obviously, I didn't even know what those crack vials were. Like, I wouldn't have picked them up if I knew. But I think that it developed us as people, right? Like, we became like really creative. And obviously, she and I were really close to each other, like frickin' frack, you know? So we were able to connect with each other. And I think that because my mom kept us so at home a lot, it kind of like brought out my desire to connect with people even more. Like, so anytime that people would come over, you know, friends at school, like, I really wanted to connect with these people because I really didn't go out. I didn't go out and do stuff like every other kid did. So my instinct was to connect, because also, guess what? Mom, super social, hyper social people. So they were also like out there connecting and making friends with strangers on lines at the supermarket. Like, that's just how we roll. That's how things were, right? So I think a lot of that influenced who I was. Honestly, it made me a better person. Even though I was limited, I felt like some of that spurred and sparked this desire to just really connect with people and just find people interesting, right? Because when you have a lot of things to do outside of the home, you tend not to maybe connect as much. But when honestly, I was forced to be indoors a lot. Any opportunity that I had to be around people, I took it, right? Like, I took it and ran with it. I connected with people. I wanted to know about you. I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand you. I wanted to, why are you feeling this way? What are your emotions? What are you experiencing? What you went through? All these different things. And I think that now I can see it. You know, back then I was like so mad at my mom because she didn't let me do anything. But now I can see that a lot of that stuff actually was good, right? It turned out really good. But back to the ghetto, because I'm giving you both sides of the story here, right? This world wasn't without its dark side. Like I told you, we picked up crack vials as we were growing up. But even in the project building itself, it was bananas, right? Like I already told you, there was weed, people smoking weed right outside my door, pretty much. But there were other crazy things that were happening. I mean, like, I remember one time we had this insane fire in our building. And it came from the top floor. It had to come from some crazy, right? The 14th floor. Apparently they were smoking something. I can only assume that it was weed because that was the thing back then. And it probably still is. He lit his mattress on fire. Somehow this person thought it was a brilliant idea not to turn it off, not to like extinguish it, but toss it down the stairs. Right? Like, why would you do that? So basically, it was the first major fire we'd ever had and ever experienced in this building in such an insanely dramatic way. Like, he literally pushed the mattress down the stairs. And I don't know how far it went down, but it basically incinerated the whole staircase. Because, you know, in the projects, in the ghetto, they don't use expensive paint. So the whole thing pretty much lit up like a Christmas tree. And it was crazy. It went all the way down to the first floor, lit up the entire staircase. And the fire department came. And obviously you can't take the elevator. So luckily there were 2 staircases. We had to go down the other staircase, which, by the way, half the time, actually probably more than 80% of the time, the lights were broken or off or covered because some people were doing crazy things in the staircases, right? So we had to go down the other staircase with our parents, and that was scary too. But I just remember getting to the bottom of the stairs, and my sister and I were cracking up uncontrollably because we had never seen something so crazy. We had never experienced anything so crazy in our lives. I mean, for this guy to be so smart, right? Obviously, he was on something. To light it up and toss it down the staircase, it's just so. Anyway, it gave us a big show, and like obviously they extinguished it. And of course, that staircase didn't get painted for like years, right? Because that's just what happens in the projects. They don't fix stuff. They don't do things. They don't clean things. So that's just the way it was. But it was a very memorable night. And then the other thing that happened in our building was also that there was a perpetual homeless man that lived there. And for those of you who, like, I don't know if any of my cousins are online, y'all remember coming to my apartment building. And we basically had a live-in doorman. who you would think, great, right? Awesome. Like, you guys have someone who can always open the door for you. No, like, a homeless man would open the door for us, like, every time we would walk in the building. It was just crazy. It was bananas. But if he was a nice guy, half the time I'm sure he was high or smoking or doing something, but he never really did anything else bad. He was just basically there. And apparently there was a whole backstory to this guy where his parents actually left, and they lived in the building and they actually left. So I actually felt for the guy. So it's like, how many times can neighbors actually call the cops on this poor guy, right? Anyway, I haven't seen him in years, but for a long time, even after I moved out of my apartment and got my own place, he was there. So insane. I mean, I don't know how my sis and I stayed innocent. I think it was probably some of the seclusion that we underwent with our mom. But, I think it was also a testament to the upbringing that we were able to have. And I guess that's part of my learning for today, right? Like, it doesn't matter where you grow up. I think that parents are such a crucial part in helping kids, become better people, become heart-centered individuals, being caring, having values, no matter where you grow up. Because I was surrounded by this stuff. I saw this stuff, this stuff was happening. By the time I was older, I knew what weed was. I knew what it was. My friends were like hanging out and drinking sometimes, things were happening. Route, that was just wasn't my thing. It's partially a testament to my own personal choices, but it's also like, how I grew up and the values that I learned even in the ghetto, right? Even in the ghetto. So it's just insane to see, like how people can grow up in places like that and still, amount to being successful, but it obviously can happen, right? And that, was my mom's determination and my dad's determination as well to like provide for our home, to always have at least our basic needs met. I have to say, we always had the basics, food, shelter, love, water, all those things were always provided for. And then also my mom, who was so amazing. And I'll talk about her story another time, but she was such a beautiful person to, just persevere. Because even though my parents did work in the factories and my dad did have like at least five jobs that I know of, they were so focused on like persevering and helping us through whatever it was that we were living in or living through. My mom always had it in mind that she was going to be successful. And I think that, that visually seeing that as a model for me was just, like MasterCard, priceless, right? Absolutely priceless. But despite the ghetto, like the values that she brought in, like just the way she modeled it for us was just beautiful. It was just amazing. And so now I'm out of the ghetto, right? Like now I'm up the hill from the ghetto, and the ghetto is not so ghetto anymore, right? But there's still a little ghetto in this girl. And that saying, like, you may find you can take a person out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of the girl. Well, that's not completely true, but there's definitely a little bit of that still inside of me, but I consider that a character. So I do sometimes bust out with like Bronx slang and like, all the different like words and things that we grew up with when I was growing up, in high school and whatnot. And that just for me is like just a character trait. That's just for me like part of who I am now. And I'm probably going to have that forever. And I just think it makes it just more beautiful, right? It's part of my beauty, so to speak. And, so many people grow up in so many rough places, and God, I feel for them because I know it's hard. And believe me when I tell you, I understand that living in a one-bedroom apartment in the same room with 3 or plus more people, it is not easy. I am not saying that it was easy by any means at all. It definitely was not. But you can go through it. You can get through it. And if, you have the right values and you have the right, surround yourself with good people when you can, like when you have all these things that you can like rely on to keep you moving, that's the best. That's just amazing, right? So just because you're in the ghetto and you're in poverty doesn't mean you have to stay there. Because honestly, a lot of that stuff, after you've grown up, it's all up here, right? You take that stuff and it kind of like you record it in your brain. Like, okay, this is how I lived. This is how things were. This is how the ghetto was. This is how poverty felt like. This is what it means to not have anything or not have, the flashiest clothes or, even because of that, have the best friends or, whatever that was. But that's all mentality after you grow up. That stuff you can absolutely sort of grow out of because it's all mindset. And I know a lot of people who've grown up in the ghetto who just continue to feel ghetto and act ghetto and be ghetto because they grew up there. And I can tell you for a fact that I grew up in that ghetto, but I am not ghetto. I am not the ghetto. The ghetto is not in me in that kind of way. I grew up in poverty, but the poverty is not in me. That stuff is over. Now I know how to get out of things. And I'll just tell you one, actually, I'll tell you a couple of things, but even as we were growing up and we were, obviously we didn't have anything, we didn't have much at all. We were still in the projects and all that. I was still able to study my ass off and go to the honors program in junior high school and high school. I graduated from Columbia University and I bought my first apartment before the age of 26. So if that's not enough for you, I don't know what is. I grew up with nothing. And somehow with the learnings that I got and the person I am, the people I surrounded myself with, my mom's values and upbringing and all just, the desire, right, to want to be better. All that stuff was still in me. And I didn't let the ghetto beat that out of me, right? I didn't let the poverty beat that out of me because I know, and I always knew that there was something better. There's something more. There's something that I want to aspire to, something I want to do with my life. I always knew that. And so now, I can see the story as like, oh my God, I experienced all these terrible things, right? All these bad things have happened to me. And like I grew up this way. I didn't have it all. Or I can see it as, man, I persevered through a lot of things. I experienced a lot of things. I grew up with nothing. I had all these different things happen and I still made it. I made it a point to make it. Like that was my desire and my goal. Do you know what I'm saying? You guys hear me out there? You with me? If you guys have any comments, please feel free to comment and post any comments below. I'm just going to keep ranting because I just, I have it inside of me now. Like, I'm just like, part of my mission is just to show people, man, like you can get through this. You can move out of these places. You can move out of that mentality. You can do it. It can be done, And all of that was part of my journey along my path of figuring out my purpose and my passion, which is what I'm bringing to you guys today. So, hey, Melissa. So thank you for being present and holding a space for me in my journey. Thank you. Because of a lot of friends who are on this right now and backing me up and have been with me through all this journey that I can say that now, I've made it all this time, but now like I feel even more empowered because I choose who I surround myself with now. I choose the environment. I choose the values I want to pursue. I choose how to bring up my son who just crawled behind me. I choose how I want to live my life. It doesn't choose for me. My past doesn't choose for me. The ghetto does not choose for me. The poverty does not choose for me. I choose for me. And you can choose for you too. So whoever's out there who needs support, who needs encouragement, who thinks that no one understands how it can be, believe me when I tell you, I understand. I absolutely understand. And once I tell you the story of how my parents grew up, then you'll really understand how much I understand because they even had it worse. My dad alone, I'll tell you this story. My dad alone, he was homeless at some point as well. Parents grew up in the farmland. Like we came literally from nothing. Okay. So if we can do it and we came from nothing and grew up and were raised in the ghetto and all these things that people say is like, oh, all these terrible things have happened to me. if we can persevere through those, you absolutely can too. Whew. So that's my message for today, y'all. Next time, I'm going to talk about my parents, what my mom taught me about focus, determination, and vision. Also, my dad and the love that he instilled in us, and how I get some of my comedy out of him. He's always making me laugh, my dad. You guys have any questions at all, feel free to post in the comments below. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. If you guys are there, I'd love for you guys to comment and say hello. Thank you again, you guys, so much for letting me share my story and, you know, being present for this. Yeah. So this is a Purpose with Passion series. And again, my topic today was my personal story on growing up in the projects, the good, the bad, and the ghetto, and how you can, and I did, shift that poverty mindset early on. You can do it later on. You can do it later on in life. It doesn't matter, but it can be done is the point, right? If you love this message and you love this video, like, subscribe in my YouTube channel. And if you want to be on my show, sign up for a 30-minute session to talk to me about what you want to talk about and see if you get interviewed. Also, if you're interested in getting out of your poverty mentality and truly pursuing your purpose with passion, then feel free to book a 45-minute discovery session as well. And I look so forward to talking to you guys soon. I love you. Thank you. And I'll see you on the purposeful and passionful side. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.